is also the last week of the Noah series. We are in this 3-week series on Noah. The movie came out in March, which seems like forever ago, doesn't it? And the movie starring Russell Crowe created controversy, but it also started a conversation about the Bible, about the flood and Genesis, and kind of re-raised some of those old questions. The movie was controversial with some artistic license, so there were some questions raised about that. But it also re-raised questions about who God is, about God's character. This is a story, it's a children's story, which is kind of a surprise because it's kind of a disaster. I mean, it makes a great disaster movie. And it raises questions about God's character. Would God wipe out everybody in the world with a flood except for Noah and his family? Is that how God operates? When a televangelist says God caused that hurricane to judge certain people, is the televangelist right? And so we've explored some of those questions in this series. On week 1, we talked about the Bible and science. We talked about how in the ancient Middle East, where the Noah story was written and set, they had a different view of the world. They believed that the world was surrounded by water. And we see that in Genesis chapter 1. And God separates the waters above from the waters below by the sky and the land. And God saw that it was good. And that's the view of the world they had. There was plenty of water around the world to come crashing in and flood the whole earth. We have a different view of the world today. But we learned that in the ancient Near East, large bodies of water were also symbols of chaos. So the world was full of violence. And the Noah story tells us that unresolved conflict results in chaos. And the waters of chaos come crashing in to the world when conflict is unresolved in our lives. Last week we talked about boundaries, and those are kind of important. If you haven't learned that yet, we all need to learn that in this life. We learned that the Noah story shows us that boundaries have to be respected and that we have to set healthy boundaries in our lives in order to be healthy people and have healthy relationships. They're extremely important. We briefly talked about natural disasters. We said that the most serious and the most natural disasters in the United States occur in what's called the Bible Belt. And this is a part of the country where church attendance is the highest and people read the Bible the most. So if God causes natural disasters to judge people, he apparently doesn't like church attendance and reading the Bible. And we just said that's just something important to note. When a televangelist, on TV says, well, God's judging this certain group of people because the hurricane came. Well, hurricanes hit the Bible Belt more than any other place. So it just gives us pause before we speak for God. Now today, we're talking about hope for the future. Hope is the expectation of a positive future. It's the anticipation that the future will be good. It'll be even better than the past. And when we talk about hope, we have to acknowledge that if life is going pretty well for you right now, hope kind of sounds cliche. Can we be honest about that? Hope is kind of like the person who puts a picture of puppies on Facebook and then says, like, if you think puppies are cute. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we all know puppies are cute. Like, it makes you kind of angry, doesn't it? Because it's just kind of like cheap likes on Facebook. And so you don't like the puppies even though they're so cute on Facebook. Hope is kind of like that sometimes. It's kind of cliche. If things are going really well in your life, talking about hope just kind of seems like that. Like, yeah, we think puppies are cute. Yeah, we think hope is important. But then the truth of the matter is we all go through experiences in life. Maybe you're not in one right now. Great, if that's the case. Maybe you are in one. When you start to question whether you can really have hope. Sometimes in general, sometimes we go through times in life that are that low, that are that rough, where we do question, is it really worth it? Is it really going to work out? Hope is one of those things. It's kind of like the Arizona winter. You don't appreciate it till it's gone. We don't necessarily appreciate how important hope is until we're tempted to lose it. And then we realize, oh man, hope is absolutely vital. That can be true in general in life in really difficult times. However, your life doesn't have to be going badly for you to question whether or not you can have hope in at least one particular area of your life. Life could be going great. The truth of the matter is, thankfully, most of us are hopeful most of the time. Most of the time, life is going well, and we're generally optimistic and hopeful about the future. And that hopefully is the case for you right now. But, however, there's still, usually, even when life is going well, there's still one particular area of your life in which you're tempted to question whether or not you can really have hope. For me personally, sometimes I feel this sense of inadequacy as a father. And when we were expecting our son, I felt that, and I really questioned. My life in general was good, but I really questioned, man, am I ready to be a dad? Am I going to be a good dad? And our son's 3 now, and he's getting more independent, and I still question that from time to time. It's, generally my life is good. I have hope, but there's this one particular area where I just question, man, am I really a good enough dad? You know what I'm talking about? In this one particular area, you're tempted to question, do I really have hope in this area? Another one, I'll be very honest with you, sometimes is I question my ability as a pastor and as a speaker. And I in this one particular area, I think, am I really able to do everything I want to do? Am I good enough to do the job that I want to do in this area? Those are obviously things that I care a lot about. And I'm tempted to question, can I really have hope that the future is going to be better, that I can really do it, that I can have this expectation, this anticipation that things are going to be great in the future, even better than they are right now in this one particular area. It's Women's Day today. A lady might have a pretty comfortable life in general, but there may be one aspect of her life where it's difficult for her to have hope. Maybe it's motherhood. Maybe it's kind of like me, only motherhood. Maybe she doubts her ability to be a good mother. Maybe she questions whether she can really have hope to be the mother she wants to be from time to time. In that one particular area, she questions that. It doesn't have to be that her whole life is despairing and hopeless, but in this one particular area, maybe it's her marriage. Maybe things are going well in general, but she has some concerns about her marriage, and she really questions at times whether she can really have hope about that. Maybe it's her career. Other things are going well, but there's this one area. Maybe it's a relationship with her parents. Maybe she's single, and she questions in this one particular area whether she can have hope that she'll really meet somebody. They could be a great, long-lasting relationship, and they can settle down and have a family. Maybe it's a different stage in life, and this could apply to men or women, of course, but the person questions, in my health. My health is kind of not where I want it to be, and I have a difficult time. I struggle with this. I have a difficult time having hope that I can be as healthy as I want to be physically, that I can feel as good as I want to feel. Maybe, for ladies in a different stage of life, maybe it's this one particular area where she's put off her dreams for years. Maybe she kind of followed her husband's career and supported him, and maybe she raised the kids and she poured into them. But now she wants to fulfill some other dreams in her life that she put on the back burner for decades. A lot of ladies experience that. You know what I mean? And maybe it's this one particular area where she's like, can I really have hope that I can fulfill my dreams? Those other things were important, and I'm glad I did those, but I have some other dreams that I want to fulfill, and she really kind of wonders if she can have hope about that. Is there one particular area in your life where you're tempted to question whether you can really have hope, anticipation, a positive expectation for the future in your life? Now, here's how to tell what it is. There's an easy test. It's whatever stresses you out. It's whatever you feel anxious about. It's whatever occupies your thoughts. And it causes anxiety in your life precisely because you're not sure if you can have hope in that area. Maybe it's finances, maybe, whatever it is. It's that one area, and it causes you anxiety. Well, the story of Noah is about hope for the future. It's about all kinds of things, but one of the greatest messages is hope. After saving Noah and his family from the chaotic waters of the flood, God makes an agreement with Noah. It's called a covenant. We'll talk about that in a minute. He makes an agreement with Noah, and he gives Noah a symbol of hope. And for those of us who are tempted to either question hope in general in life or in one particular area, listen to what the story of Noah says about hope. First of all, God tells Noah to respect all life. This is after the flood. They come out of the ark. He says, I want you to have a new respect for life, both for animals and for humans. And we're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 8, and you can read along on the screen. Genesis 8:15. Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so that they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number on it. So Noah came out together with his sons and his wives, and his wife and his sons' wives. All the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground and all the birds, everything that moves on land, came out of the ark, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. And this is just a feature of ancient religion where animals were sacrificed to the gods. This was typical in the culture, taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds. He sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter. There's a famous hymn that comes from this. You know what it is? Great is thy faithfulness, summer and winter, and springtime and harvest, sun, moon, and stars in their courses above. It says, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And then we'll skip ahead to chapter 9, verse 12. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant, agreement, I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, that includes us, a covenant for all generations to come. I've set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. Let's pray before we continue the message. God, we thank you for this scripture, and it's challenging. It comes out of a very different time on the other side of the planet. And God, here we sit with the concerns of 21st century America on this Mother's Day and Women's Day, and we all bring our own anxieties and our own areas of life where we question whether or not we can have hope, that the future will be better than the past. Maybe it's one particular area. We pray, God, that we would let your scripture speak to us, that we would open our hearts, that we would be sensitive, that we would have tender hearts today, open to the healing that you want to do in our lives, and open to the hope that you want to give to us. In Jesus' name. And everybody said, amen. So God makes a covenant with Noah. Among Bible scholars, it's creatively called the Noahic covenant. Fancy schmancy, eh? The Noahic covenant. A covenant is a legal agreement. In the ancient Near East, there were several kinds of covenants. It's like a contract. It's a deal. One of the types of covenants in the ancient Near East was called a suzerain vassal covenant. A suzerain is a lord, a wealthy landowner who has a powerful army and who calls the shots in the area, kind of like in feudal times, a big warlord. Right? And this is the way that society was organized at this time. And a vassal was someone who was not the wealthy, powerful landowner who called the shots. And the way it worked, in the ancient world, a vassal may have been a king who was a weak king, and the suzerain came in, and the suzerain would make a covenant, an agreement with the vassal. And in the ancient world, being a vassal was usually not a good thing, because the covenant would go something like this. The suzerain would come to the vassal and say, I have a lot of money and a lot of power, much more than you do. Here's the deal I want to make with you. You will pay taxes to me, and you will fight in my wars, or I will kill you. What is your choice? And the vassal, not surprisingly, usually would say, deal. And the suzerain would maybe, hopefully, protect the kingdom of the vassal. And the vassal could be this puppet king and kind of pretend to be the king, while the suzerain got all the benefits of the suzerain vassal covenant. So the vassal paid the price tag, and the suzerain got all the benefits of the suzerain vassal covenant. Well, in the Noahic covenant, the form actually fits the ancient suzerain vassal covenant. You would imagine, God is the suzerain, and Noah is the vassal. And we find ourselves in the Noah story, and the truth of the matter is you and I are the vassal. And when we go through experiences in life where we realize we're not in control as much as we would like to think, we're reminded that we're vassals. Isn't that kind of the truth? We don't have as much power and wealth and control as we would like, and we can find ourselves in this story. So the form of the covenant looks like a suzerain vassal covenant. However, the content of the covenant is much different than the typical suzerain vassal covenant. In this covenant that God makes with Noah, God takes on most of the responsibility. Whereas an ancient king would have just put it all on the vassal, God actually says, you know what, Noah, here's what I want from you. and from all human beings, I want you to have a greater respect for life. God says in Genesis 6, before the flood, that the earth was full of violence and corruption. God says, I want you to have a greater respect for life, both animals and humans. And so that's what I want from you. And then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a lot more patient with you people. So God takes on most of the responsibility. God says, I'm not going to destroy the world in this manner anymore. I'm going to take a different position relative to human beings. I'm going to chill out a little bit. And all I want from you is I want you to have a greater respect for life. The suzerain vassal covenant, and this tells us something about God's character, shows Noah, and it shows me, you and I, that this God is willing to take on most of the responsibility in a legal agreement. And the whole thing benefits us anyway, because it creates a better world, a less violent, less corrupt world. There was a poll taken a couple of years ago that found 75% of Americans have a negative view of God. They either view God as this authoritarian taskmaster, or this critical parent, or a distant force that doesn't care. It's 3/4 of all Americans. And I would assume that's probably true of church people too. So most of us, when we think of God, the truth of the matter is we don't think of a God who takes on most of the responsibility and always works for our best interest. A lot of us think of an authoritarian judge, a cosmic cop in the sky waiting to bust us, put us in a hammerlock. We think of a God, maybe, yeah, if you had a critical parent, the truth of the matter is you've projected that onto God, probably. And God's always nitpicking. He's always after you. He's always on your case for something. Or God is this distant force, and maybe you've gone through some painful experiences in life. And God did not act in the way that you wanted God to act. And, it's normal. It's understandable. You're not the only one if you feel this way, but maybe you feel like God's this distant force. But the story of Noah tells us that God is actually the kind of God who makes promises, agreements. He cuts deals with human beings that actually benefit the humans more than they benefit him. And God looks at you the same way. God cuts this kind of a covenant with Noah. And in this covenant, there are two things that speak to those of us who are tempted to question whether to have hope in life in general or in this one particular area, whatever it was that you were thinking of. So first, if you're taking notes, there's a place to write some things down if you'd like to remember them in your worship handout. When you're tempted to give up hope in general, if life's pretty rough, and if it's not right now, hopefully it stays that way, but it may not in the future. When life's really rough and you're tempted to give up hope in general, remember the natural rhythms of life. We read in Genesis 8, God says, as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, will never cease. There are rhythms to life. There are seasons in life. And especially younger people, when they go through really, really difficult situations, maybe don't have the life experience to know that you can finish it for me. This too shall pass. That there are seasons in life. And if you're feeling really down right now, it's a season. There are natural rhythms to life. And it may not feel like it. And this could sound like a simplistic, pat answer, like, oh, this is a Sunday school answer. It's either Jesus, Bible, or prayer. Whenever somebody asks a question in Sunday school, here's the cliche answer. Here it comes. This too shall pass. Well, it's just the truth, isn't it? How many of you would kind of testify? Can I get a witness? How many of you would testify that you go through times in life where it's a season, but this too shall pass? How many of you would raise your hand and say that? For those of us who are struggling with hope, yeah, you see a lot of people who've gone through some pretty dark, difficult times, but it was a season. And if that could be an encouragement to you, if you feel depressed, if you're lacking hope in general, it's a season. Now, there could be a medical cause. I always tell people, please email me. I can refer you to a counselor. You can see a doctor. You may be suffering in hopelessness, and it could be a thyroid. It could. Why suffer? Go get it checked out, see what's going on. Maybe counseling would help, but there are cycles in life. There's a natural rhythm to life, but it doesn't, here's more good news, it doesn't mean that natural rhythm to life and those seasons always just do this, and it's just like this for the rest of your life, up and down. What life can look like because of the promises that God wants to make you and the life that God has for you. The word salvation in the Bible means wholeness. which implies that God can take you places. God can do things in your life that make your life better in the future than they are right now. God can make you a more whole person over time. That's what God wants to do in your life. He wants to give healing to you and lead you through a journey toward wholeness in your life so that life doesn't look like this, but life can kind of look like this. To where there's an upward trend. That's what we like to see, right? Especially if you're investing. We like to see the upward trend. Life can look like that. That's the kind, when you have a God who makes promises and cuts deals that benefit you more than they do him, his deals benefit the vassal more than the suzerain, life can look like this. And you always have your ups and downs, but here's the cool thing. Both the lows and the highs can get higher. Is that right? If you're struggling with hope in general, remember the natural rhythms of life. And over time, in faith, both the lows and the highs can get higher. I've told this story before, but this church has grown a lot, and some people may not have heard this a few months ago. So when I was 18, I was a senior in high school, and I realized I was depressed. It came from a tough home life. There were circumstances behind it, and I had a lot of hurt and sadness that was built up in me. But as a dude, I couldn't say hurt and sadness. I was angry. Because it's okay for a dude to be angry. It's not okay for a dude to say he's hurt. So I was angry. But it looked like, that anger looked like depression in my life, and I knew I had to do something. I got to the point, maybe some of you have been there, where I knew I didn't have a choice. Or the choice that I had just wasn't a very good one. And I knew that something had to give, and I went to see a counselor. And the counselor diagnosed me with depression. And the psychiatrist there in the office wrote a prescription for antidepressants. I took the antidepressants and went to counseling for about 9 months. And there are some pastors, somebody who's a counselor in the congregation, we talked about this last week. For some reason, there are some pastors, for some wacky reason, that will make people feel bad for taking antidepressants. You're not going to hear that from me. It's possible that antidepressants in counseling saved my life. And they've saved the lives of lots of other people too. So maybe that would be a solution if you feel like life is just hopeless right now. But I've been fortunate because it was a season. I don't have to take them anymore. If I did, I would readily admit that because I don't think there's any shame in that whatsoever. But it was a season for me. And once my circumstances changed, I felt better. And the story of my life has looked like that upward trend graph. There's a rhythm to life. I met with somebody this week who told me that the past few years of his life have felt like a roller coaster. Somebody actually said that to me this morning, too. They're just kind of on an emotional roller coaster right now, and we talked about his life, and he's right. He's been through some tough times. And after we talked about it for a while, I joked that he should start a new church. Because I'm like, it's the same thing, man. I'm like, it's the emotional roller coaster is always there. And if you don't know the story of our church, my wife and I moved out here in March of 2012, and man, we were sky high. We did not have jobs. There's a fine line between faith and stupidity. We probably crossed over that line many times. And thinking about moving to Perry High School in 3 weeks has made me reminisce on this experience. And we had a lunch in our home in April. All of 7 people showed up. Talk about a crash and burn. It was like sky high and then And then over the summertime, we formed relationships with some more people. And during midsummer, we had about 10 to 15 people on board. I'm like, yeah, this is coming together. We're gathering people. So we were high again. And then we launched monthly practice services at a nearby theater. And the first service in October of 2012, there were 43 people there total. 13 of them were kids. Like 5 of them were adults who were working in the kids. So the very first One Church sermon I gave to like 25 people in a movie theater. The worst Hollywood flop pulls in more than 25 people in a movie theater. I mean, it was another low. Like, is this going to work? What are we going to do? A month later, we got kicked out of said theater. Even lower. And I had actually called about this school months before, but they thought that another church was meeting here. So we got kicked out of the theater. I thought, what am I going to do? I desperately called the Chandler School District. Turns out a mistake was made. This school was available. We're high again. So in December of 2012, we had a practice service here. We launched weekly worship services on March 10th, 2013 with 118 people in attendance, more than I expected. So we were up again. And then last fall, I gave a sermon where I said, we're going to love everybody, regardless of who they are and who they love. And about 25 or 30% of the congregation said no thanks and left. And it was a low point. But even more people came because they liked that idea. And so it was a high point again. Do you see where this is going? You know, up and down and up and down. And now we've had this amazing blessing to have the opportunity to move to Perry High School on June 1st. We're going to be here for 2 more Sundays here at this school, and then we're going to be moving to Perry High School. If you show up here on June 1st, it's going to be a real low for you, actually. So we're going to move to Perry High School June 1st. Now, the thing about Perry High School is that's the Perry Auditorium behind that graphic. It seats, I've thought, it seats over 500 people. And these cushioned seats, which I've since found out are the most important thing about a church, actually. Cushioned seats. It's a state-of-the-art auditorium, plenty of room for kids. We're maxed out with kids' space here. We know we're going to max out the parking here in 6 to 9 months. So we have this amazing opportunity to move here. This room seats 500 people. We're going to take up the first few rows. We're actually going to drape off most of the seats to try to fool you and make you think the room is smaller than it actually is. And a person could walk into Perry High School on June 1st, and they could think, oh man, this church is tiny compared to this room. What are they doing here? This room's huge. This is like a mega church size auditorium. This church is so small. They should have stayed at Hancock. A person could say that. Or a person could say, this church has hope for the future. That they're going to need more space. First of all, the kids are already maxed out, so that's not a choice. But they're going to need more space. We're not trying to be a mega church. That's never been the goal, and I don't think that's going to happen, to be honest with you. But we have hope for the future. That there are more people in the Southeast Valley who could use a church where their questions and doubts are welcome. Where they don't have to pretend that everything's cool and they have no problems and they're a super Christian to fit in. And where they can serve and make a difference. And it's not just about, heaven's not just about an evacuation plan, but it's about making the world better here. As Jesus says, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We believe that more people in the Southeast Valley need a church like that. Do you agree? And so we're moving to Perry because we have hope for the future. That there are more people who will connect. So if you're tempted to give up hope in general, remember there are natural rhythms to life. Or maybe for you, life is generally good. Maybe you have hope overall. Maybe life's great. But there's one particular area where you're tempted to question whether or not you can really have hope. And if you're keeping notes, when you're tempted to give up hope in a particular area, remember God's sign of the rainbow. In Genesis 9, God says, whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Calling a truce, basically. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures in every kind on the earth. John Walton is a professor of Old Testament at Wheaton College, Illinois, and we've said in this series that the Noah story is set in ancient Mesopotamia, which is the cradle of Western civilization. And we don't know when exactly. This could be 2,000, 3,000 years ago when this story began to be told. But listen to what Walton says about what the rainbow might mean. One more tidbit. The Assyrian Empire was in the northern part of Mesopotamia, what is now northern Iraq. Okay, so the Assyrian Empire comes from the same area. Right, here's what John Walton writes. An 11th century BC Assyrian relief shows 2 hands reaching out of the clouds. One hand offering blessing, the other holding a bow. And this would have been typical of the view of Mesopotamian and Assyrian gods. You got to watch out for one hand because the other one might get you. Right? The gods are reaching out one hand with a blessing and the other a bow. Since the word for rainbow is the same Hebrew word as that used for the bow weapon, as in a bow and arrow, this offers an interesting image. The bow was often in the armory of a divine warrior in the ancient Near East. And referring to the rainbow as a sign of God's covenant, Walton says, it is a pregnant image to have God hanging up his bow. Isn't that cool? That Possibly, in context, the message of the rainbow in Noah is God saying, you know what? I really got angry and grieved over the violence and the corruption in this world, and I sent the flood. But I'm going to take a different approach from now on. I'm going to hang up my bow. And there's the sign of the rainbow. It's a sign from God to Noah and his descendants, which includes all of us, that God is not angry with you. That God is not aiming at you. That God has hung up his bow. And God's posture towards you is one of patience. And God's like, now I'm going to make a deal with you to where it's going to benefit you. And this God is now on your side. I'm going to be patient, merciful. I'm going to chill out with humans and their problems and their screw-ups. And I'm going to help. I'm going to hang up my bow, and I'm going to help. Now, in that particular area of your life that you're thinking of where you're tempted to question whether you could have hope, that in that one area of your life could be better in the future. This means that God is on your side. The suzerain, the wealthy one with the control and the power is on your side in that particular area of your life and wants to help you. If you question whether you can be an adequate mother, well, there's a God who's hung up his bow. And in his patience for his creation, he could lead you in a path of healing in your own heart. Maybe you're a great mom, actually, but there's this voice of self-criticism. Maybe that's what's really going on. Or maybe if there are things in your life that are causing anxiety, well, that God can come along and help you, lead you to resources, and maybe a church could be a part of that, where it's counseling, or it's the Boundaries book we talked about last week, or it's signing up for a one group back here at the Connect table, and they're starting next month. And that could be a support network for you. That God has hung up his bow, and he wants to help you and work with you in that area of your life, that one particular area where you question whether you can really have hope or not. That God, that suzerain, is on your side. Now, my mom has 5 sisters, or she had 5 sisters, and they have been prominent in my life, and I have seen all the challenges they faced. You know, most of them had, good lives overall. They were hopeful, optimistic people overall. But on Women's Day, I've been thinking about the women that I knew growing up. What were the particular challenges they faced, and how were they tempted to question whether they could have hope or not? One of my aunts cared for an ailing husband for many years before he passed away. She since lost a son in a car accident. Her granddaughter was a police officer who was killed in the line of duty in her early 20s. She's faced some of the deepest, darkest fears that many people would face. And of course, it's been a tough process for her, but you know what? She's making it. And an area of life where many people could question, I don't think I could ever continue if something like that happened. You know what the truth is? She's making it. In that one particular area that many people question, she's doing okay. She's doing okay. Another aunt raised several kids as a single mom, and they faced their challenges and with exes too, and there were some tough times there. And you know what? She's made it. And so maybe that's an area, I feel so overwhelmed with responsibilities I have, and I question whether I can really have hope in this one particular area, whether I can really do a good job. Well, she's done okay. She's made it. Another aunt is a pastor's wife. Enough said. If your husband's a pastor, you're going to have problems. You just know that. That's going to take a lot of patience. My wife could vouch for that. You know what? They're doing okay. Another aunt, the one I'm closest to, actually went through a divorce. Infidelity was involved, and she had to pick up the pieces. Right after that, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And a lot of people, that one particular area in life is health-related or relationship-related. I don't know if I could make it. I don't know if I can have hope that I could make it in this area. Well, you know what? She's doing okay. She remarried. She's healthy. That was a long time ago, actually. And they're great people. All of them are strong women. All of them have faced things that a lot of people, would be afraid of. And all of them overcame and came out better and stronger on the other side. So what is it for you? What is that one particular area where you're tempted to question whether you can really have hope in that area? Is it motherhood? God might say to you, as we've said here before, there is such a thing as good enough parenting. The truth is, if you care enough to question whether you're a good mom, you probably are. I would be leery of the person who's like, oh, I'm a great mom. Yeah, perfect. I would be leery of that person who thinks everything's great and they don't critique themselves at all. If you care enough to ask, you probably are. Now, if there are things going on in your life, anxiety, busyness, other things that are putting pressure on you and making it harder for you, well, then those are things, because God is hanging up, those are things that God can help you to address. And you can win. You can have bright hope in your ability as a mom. Maybe could be for women or men here. Is it the question of your ability to live out your dream, like we talked about earlier? Do I really have the ability to accomplish my goals? Can I be a success in life? Well, God is hanging up his bow. And the suzerain can help you to do that. I've discovered in some of the deepest, darkest times of my life, and this is a church where questions and doubts are welcome, and I understand that big preacher statements like this, some people are skeptical of. In the major, deep, dark times of my life, I've discovered that prayer works. Anybody vouch for that? I've discovered that there are times when I thought we were at the end of the rope, we've tied a knot, and now there's no more room to tie a knot, that I just said, okay, God, we need you to come through. And it wasn't always the way I wanted, but I've discovered that God has hung up his bow, and that there are amazing resources that the suzerain has that are available to you. Maybe it is your physical health. Maybe you're looking for purpose. Maybe you're at a place in life. You could be retired and looking for purpose, or you could be younger. You could have a quarter-life crisis and realize, you know what? The rat race is not going to work for my life. I need purpose. Just remember, think about it before you tell me you need purpose, because I can give you all kinds of purpose in this church. I give you all kinds of stuff that could give you all kinds of purpose. We need all kinds of leadership and help in this church. What is that particular area in your life that causes you to question whether you can really have hope? God has hung up his bow, and he's available to help you. Next week, we're starting a new series called IQ EQ. And in this series, it's based on the biblical understanding of salvation and wholeness that I talked about, and also there's a best-selling book called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. And we're going to look at how emotions run more deeply than we think. Emotions affect us a lot more than we realize, but how to control them a little better, and how to connect with the people in our lives on a deeper emotional level, and how to minimize the negative emotions and maximize the positive emotions. Maybe a series like that would be helpful. If you come back next week, we're going to be talking about a similar topic, and I'm going to close with this. Choosing hope can be difficult. The movie Ray, based on the life of Ray Charles, came out in 2004, starring Jamie Foxx. It's an amazing performance. And if you don't know Ray Charles' story, first of all, of course, he's a legendary R&B musician. Ray Charles went blind when he was 7 years old. He wasn't born blind. He could see until he was 7, and then he went blind. Now, you could imagine how difficult of an experience that would be in that one particular area for a little boy. And not only for him, but also for his mother, who was heartbroken to see her little boy going through this. Ray's mother had a choice to make. She could either do everything for him and make him dependent on her, or she could say, I won't be around forever, and I need to raise my son in a way that he can overcome this one particular area in his life. And she was right, because she passed away 8 years later when he was 15. She empathized with him, but she didn't do everything for him. She chose to have hope in his future, that in this one particular area he could overcome, that he could have hope in this one area. And one day he tripped over the rocking chair, not able to see the rocking chair. She was teaching him to count his steps as he walked around the house to know where he was, but he tripped over the rocking chair, and he called out to his mom for help. And she had to make this heartbreaking decision to let him overcome and have hope in this one particular area of his life. Let's watch. Choosing hope can be difficult, even if it's in one particular area. And Ray Charles was able to tune into his sense of hearing in spectacular fashion throughout his life. So what is it for you? Are you questioning whether or not you can have hope in general? Well, remember, there is a natural rhythm to life. You saw a lot of people who could vouch for the fact that there are seasons in life, and this too shall pass. If it's depression, maybe it's counseling, antidepressants, maybe there's a medical cause. I could refer you to a counselor. You can talk to somebody. You don't have to go through that alone. Are you questioning whether or not you can have hope in a particular area? Well, God has hung up his bow, and the suzerain is available to you to lead you on a process of wholeness and healing to where life can look like this, even in that one particular area as well. And you can have bright hope in every area of your life. There doesn't have to be any area where you question whether or not you can have hope. God's hung up his bow, and hope is available to you and I.